I think we should get started.
Yes.
So I'll bring the meeting to order and mention that we are operating today under this hybrid meeting is operating under the Albemarle County Continuance of Governance Ordinance. And we'll get started. So first, we're going to, this is sort of a heads up or an update about a project that we've been talking about probably for 3 years,
A long time.
which is a reorganization of the policy manual itself to make it more kind of user-friendly for the stakeholders who might need to use it. So broadly speaking, I think the public would probably come first. Internally and staff, we have some governance types of things. And the point being that the way it's laid out right now doesn't necessarily give, especially the public, what they need to know kind of up front. And you'll, I don't know, I'm not looking at it right now, but it's early in the list, for example, is the regional agreement is kind of like the third thing. It's what, a 30, 40 page document. And it's important to have, but just from an organization standpoint, that to me makes more sense as sort of an appendix, as a reference, and sort of what do you need to know about using the library is probably what most people, what we want to kind of put up front. Part of that at the time we originally talked about it was there's also a few little personnel related or internal personnel related policies kind of scattershot or sprinkled through here and there. So there's something like, I think we're going to bring up today, parking, and I remember disciplinary actions was one of those. So that was one of the motivations for the employee handbook project, which we've put a great deal of work into, and I'm super proud of how that turned out. But now that we have the employee handbook in hand, we can go through and look at policies that are covered there and don't necessarily need to be public-facing policy level documents. Or if they need to be policy level, but still not necessarily public-facing, they can be moved to a separate section that's not necessarily the policy manual that's going to be most primarily of interest to the public. This would not necessarily include rewriting any policies. Those will continue kind of one by one at our approach of a scheduled review or a regular review. But it would involve just reordering a bunch of stuff with the content that's already there, probably renumbering as part of that, and
Potentially deprecating some.
yeah, and deprecating some that we feel are better covered at a procedural level or an operational level, and perhaps because they're already now covered in that employee handbook, which is an operational level document. So that's something I'd like to kind of accomplish over the next year. This is sort of a heads up about that. And if and when we get there, I would envision it just being presented to the board as one master set of red lines. Here's the old and here's the new, and we're going to show you all the different numbers, and that we would just sort of at a board level say, yes, we're cool with the with this new organization. And again, it would be relatively easy in the sense that we're not changing word. This wouldn't involve in and of itself changing wording or concepts from that level. What else?
Just that the reason that we listed the specific ones on the agenda today is because those are policies that were up for 10-year review either in 2021 or 2022. So those are kind of the ones that, maybe for Camille's sake, that every 10 years we review policies, so they would have been reviewed, but instead we're talking about doing something different.
And so for that reason, we're kind of justifying, hey, we can wait a couple months before we do a scheduled review, because as part of a reorg, we might be deprecating them anyways, and it sort of makes sense to look at that all in a batch rather than, okay, we're going to tweak the words of parking today, but then 3 months from now, we might say, well, we don't need parking. The other piece that reminds me, part of the reorganization that we've talked about as a possibility is changing the schedule on a policy by policy basis Some a 10-year review makes sense, and some a more frequent review, like things related to technology and so forth, might be a 3-year review or a 5-year review or what have you. So each year there would still be a slate of things up for review that year, but some of them would be from most recent review 3 years ago, or 5 or 10 or what have you. So that would be a secondary thing we could look at while we're sort of thinking about the entire batch as a whole. Okay, any comments, questions, thoughts on this? Again, today, this is sort of just a heads up, partly motivated, as David pointed out, by the idea that these would technically, some of these would be up for review, and we're not forgetting about them. We're just kind of choosing, if you all agree, to kind of defer for a couple months until we can consider them as within this whole framework.
And I'll mention also that thanks to Sarah, she did an audit of all the policy dates to make sure that we're up we have the correct information, and found a few problems here and there, so things that we can now slide into the normal review process. So that's complete. We now are sure that we know exactly when everything was last reviewed. Great.
Okay, then we can move on to one of the regularly scheduled reviews, which is policy 4.32, interlibrary loan. That was a handout.
Yeah, it's there. I can screen share as well.
So one question I always think about is, are there parts of this that are sort of too detailed from an operational standpoint and either should just be moved to operational or should be turned into a more of a high level type of guidance? And then, and I'm not saying one way or the other for this, I'm just suggesting that as a first area of review.
Yeah, this is highly procedural.
Yeah.
It gets into a lot of detail about how staff are to handle interlibrary loans, and it's an invaluable document for staff to point to, I think, to say, hey, here's how we do this.
Yeah, I was about to, my flip side thought of that is this is something that's important for the public.
If the public wanted to know,
be able to see
what am I getting into?
Yes, yeah,
they can see it.
Right.
I had a question on this policy.
Yeah.
Is line number 2 really correct? I mean,
Yes.
are our holdings in OCLC so that other libraries can see them?
They are not in OCLC, but we get requests occasionally, very infrequently, because we're not an OCLC library.
Is that a budget thing?
The reason that we're not in OCLC, yes.
Yeah, it would cost a lot to get our holdings put in there.
Yeah, I think the last time we checked in it was like $30,000 or $40,000 annually. So it's not necessarily something that that we wouldn't do or explore, but the value wasn't there, basically.
Yeah.
It was in order for us to share our collection out. Hi, Kathy, we see you.
How do other libraries?
I mean, they consider it part of their operation.
Hey, Kathy.
Just like they would, they've made an institutional decision that this is an invaluable part of being a public library, and we're going to do this. And from the beginning, they've charged for it. So somebody might look at some service or feature we have and say, how do they afford that? It's because long ago, we made the decision that this is important and we're going to do it.
So how would that, maybe a little bit of a tangent here, but how would that decision be revisited or reviewed?
I think it would be, it comes up periodically in a strange way, Mike. It comes up in the Technology Advisory Committee, which has a lot of tech services folks in it, and it gets reviewed by our tech services staff. So basically, what you get out of it is access to other libraries' cataloging records. So you have, we get an item in hand, and we can access now. We have very specific sources that we use. Then you could access all of those OCLC holdings, which makes cataloging a bit easier. And then the flip side is what you give is now your catalog is available for everywhere to borrow from, and you mail things out. Operationally, we would review it annually to see whether or not, and we've never reached a tipping point where it seemed like it was an important organizational thing to do, even though most libraries are members of this.
And I'm not sure I have a position just thinking about it right now, but I could imagine an argument that, hey, a lot of our, most or all of our materials were funded by state aid in the first place. Should we have a responsibility to the broader community
That's a good argument.
outside our borders, especially since we do benefit from getting that from other libraries? And I don't know. It's to me, as just again, as I'm hearing this for the first, or thinking about it, it's a budget consideration as and work for the staff, which in some ways translates back to budget, versus this conceptual reason. I'm not sure that only operation will be, year to year, I can see that, but it seems to me that that's sort of a higher level conceptual decision that you might think about every 10 years or something. But I don't see a framework for that.
We don't have a framework.
Policy, and other than this, maybe I suppose.
Yeah, I think we have reached out and gotten pricing approximately every 5 to 10 years to see if the housing comes out.
Yeah.
And there might be things that I'm missing there that maybe, the tech services have to be able to speak better about, what value JMRL gets and what value we give.
Okay, so I think just my own thought is I'll include in my report, just pointing out that we don't participate. If there's anyone in this committee that has for us to consider more strongly something other than the status quo, we can bring it up now. But I think it would be right for the other trustees to know about this.
Sure, yeah, I think that's something that is kind of unique about our institution that the board has a right to know.
Okay.
My next
Now
question
we can get back to the wording.
is whether or not this is still the most up-to-date Virginia Interlibrary Load Cone of 1989 and guidelines.
It might be.
Well, it was in 2011.
Yeah. That could be. That'd be easy to fix if it's not.
Okay, so that sounds like a research
Mhm.
point. If you can get a volunteer or assign it, or I wouldn't know how to look for that.
I can look for it.
Have a volunteer. And the other another piece I don't love here is that the $3 is hardwired, because that means that the board would have to
Two policies.
think about, would have to get involved if we need to change it for some reason.
I think I agree. I would rather than say there is a fee and then the schedule will say what the fee is.
Yeah. So here, instead of $3, you would say parentheses, describe where you would look.
Don't want the, I think my guess is that this was added when that change was made, because that was a pretty substantial change that JMRL made at a certain point. And it affected a lot of people, and they wanted to, I'm sure, get the wording out in as many places as possible.
Right.
And justify it, such as per item to offset postage costs.
Yeah.
Do we still need that now that it's been our policy for over a decade, I think?
So not that it's relevant to the policy discussion, but how many ILLs requests do we get a year, more or less?
I'd have to look that up, Tony, but less than we did when it was free, but still
Sure.
quite a.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant service that we offer.
I think our collections folks do a good job of trying to, and we're talking about doing some streamlining here in general too, of like if somebody makes a request for ILL and a request for purchase, like can we start to look at those at the same time? Would we rather have this item than borrow it? But we're not there yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, if it was me, I would say we'll offer interlibrary services for a per item fee to offset postage costs. And then the question would be how do you cleanly describe where that fee lives?
I don't know if it's important to say it to the public, but we're calling it postage costs, but really the larger cost is an administrative cost per loan in OCLC, so
So would postage and handling sort of cover that? Or does that sound?
Postage and administrative. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, just say postage and
It's
administrative,
important for the public to really, they don't understand.
This is back to my point. I do we need to justify this.
Yeah, I wonder if we could just take that out.
Yeah, just offer a per item fee payable when picking up requested items. Fees are set annually by the library board. And of course, this is one I think that's going to change. The fines and fees likely will move to an appendix that gets.
Yeah.
It's a little like misleading to say it's postage because it's really not postage. That's the smaller cost.
Well, I mean,
right?
that's a big part of it.
It's part of it, but just doing IOL and OCLC is pretty expensive per transaction, right?
I think we pay for a license fee for that access annually. So I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Patrick, but I don't think there's a per use fee.
I thought there was.
I could be wrong about that. I mean, I think if we added up true costs, it's a lot more than $3. I think the $3
Yeah,
was
so-
set. I think at the time, the $3 was set because we couldn't keep up with demand. We had so many people asking for things.
Right.
People were asking for things that we should have in the collection to one.
Exactly.
And it was meant to be like a little like think twice about this. Are you sure you want that?
You could just say to offset costs and just get rid of.
Yeah, that's true.
postage.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just such a convenience. I remember working at Gordon Avenue at the time and people asking for materials and looking them up and seeing that they were available at Clemens several blocks away.
Right.
And somebody would say, oh, just send it to me. And it wouldn't necessarily come from Clemens. It might come from Idaho, but the public didn't, that wasn't part of the message basically.
Right.
I guess that brings up an topic with, I know for a while we had kind of a special and we don't need a long description of why that seems to change that. But would that possibility, because they are as a large holding that's right around the corner, does that need to be mentioned here in any special way? Is anything,
I think not until we get some clarity on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of on hold. It was on hold this semester effectively while the university libraries were open to their public again, which they weren't most of last year. So I'm expecting that we'll revisit that. I'm not sure we'll get back to what we had last year, which was fantastic.
I mean, was that considered an ILL? I think it was not. I think it got, well, at least for the fee standpoint.
It was not, we did not charge a $3 fee for that. We waived the $3 fee for that. It was considered an ILL by the university, which is one of the problems. They have a big separate ILL department that was handling this. And once they started fully back up, they couldn't handle this anymore. So we're working on a way to get this handled, not through their ILL department, but through their kind of similar to a circulation department, customer service type.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that that's not dead.
Yeah.
We can get that back.
Okay, but it may not be considered ILL if we get it back.
I mean, there's not really another way to describe it. It's
Well, I'm
not,
just trying
that's
to,
what it is.
I guess I'm trying to future-proof this.
Right.
Or just think about, whether that any future-proofing would be useful. I guess that's my question.
I mean, we could change this to May But that's a little too misleading the other way.
Mm.
If we're gonna be, for right now, it's $3, no matter, even if it comes from university.
Okay, well, I think if you waive it for a class of loans, nobody's gonna complain.
Yeah, and I also think we could maybe do that in the fines and fee schedule as well.
Right.
Non-UVA.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I like that, yeah,
And then that comes every year.
great.
What is that? What is the policy number for that? And do we want to? Maybe we should just do it by name because it might change. Circulation fines and fees. Here's the same wording, Jenny.
Yeah,
Interlibrary loan fee to offset postage costs is $3.
yeah. I just think it's kind of,
Well, this gets reviewed.
I like to
annually.
explain to people kind of how things work.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not really descriptive.
Yeah, I like just the costs because I like that better. We're not gonna change this now, but
It probably shouldn't be a special notice, but it should be a. Oh, I guess it's that because it's a fee, not a bond.
I noticed that this doesn't seem to have been reviewed in 21.
Yeah, I think there were no suggested changes last year.
I see. Only if you have a change.
Yeah. Usually those come through me from the circulation manager.
okay.
But I'll make sure to bring it up this year just so that the board has a chance to look at the overall structure and the wording. And there might be some stuff they want to.
I don't like the last paragraph anymore. Seems unfriendly. The word, the way it's worded is it's kind of threatening.
Yeah, I don't like abuse in particular.
Yeah.
I guess somebody.
I mean, I understand the reason it's here.
Oh,
because
sure.
This isn't something that happens automatically like it does with JMRL materials, and they wanted to get across the point that JMRL might not be allowed to borrow from that institution anymore.
It's good for the idea to be in there. I don't like the passive way that it's said in that last sentence.
Yeah.
I almost feel like you could just, to the second to last paragraph, just add one more sentence about,
Please endeavor to return library materials. on
well,
time.
no, I think it's fair to say if it becomes a pattern of problems, that there's consequences, right? I mean, so is there just a nice one sentence way to say that at the end of the previous paragraph?
Yeah, I think we do need to have something because that is outside of our normal circulation policies and procedures. This is the only place that would be. If a patron came back and said, well, your circ policy says as long as I pay for it, I can come back and I can check out materials again. This is the only place that staff would point to and say, well, actually, because we had to borrow that from somebody else and it was, twice now you've destroyed something, then.
But it's also, I think this one I'm noticing, do not pick up requested items. So if I order 10 ILLs, you don't get my $30 until I show up. But in the meantime, the library is out of pocket. So that it's not just, I think that's another pattern we have to protect against.
So actually, there's two different points in this paragraph, and both of them I think are important to get across, but it's just a matter of trying to find
Right.
a nicer way to say that. We're not seeking this out, but should it happen?
What are the 2 points?
Well, one, I think it's important to say, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but that the borrowing privileges of JMRL get jeopardized if there's a problem. I think that's important justification.
Yeah.
And two, to say like, hey, your interlibrary loan borrowing privileges might be suspended after a warning.
Yeah,
So you could say something like, since or because JMRL relies on good relationships with its lending partners, repeated,
I don't know how to get away from abuse.
yeah, well, no, just repeated.
Instances of,
Repeated. Fraction.
repeated lost or
Problems or-
damage, overdue, or not picked up items.
Get not picked up.
Is that correct?
If there
Just
was.
put, yeah. Just put problems as a placeholder, maybe, you know, let's try and finish, see what the sets will look like, well,
Repeated problems.
okay, from an individual patron,
Borrow with IOL service.
yeah. May result.
Maybe patrons who repeatedly return items late or damaged or do not pick up their ILLs
Yeah.
Good.
To
lose their, something like that.
yes, state.
Abuse.
Violate.
You should actually pull up the.
I think you can put it in a list. Those things are important for individuals to
Well, I think the
understand.
thing is
Yeah.
that, the do not picking up requested items is such a change from our other circulation policies. To me, that's the one important one. The other ones are just kind of like, to me at least, oh yeah, of course, right? If you repeatedly damage things or repeatedly lose them.
Maybe
Well,
misuse.
Maybe,
Patrons who
but, you
fail,
know,
fail to pick up or return, repeatedly fail something.
Repeatedly
I
failed.
mean, we get questions from patrons. How about if I want to keep this book, can I
Uh-huh.
just pay for it?
Yeah.
And that is a thing that is not good.
You know, you're talking about ILL
Yeah,
in
the answer
particular.
is no. But then, of course,
How
you
about
know,
repeatedly fail to follow IOL procedures?
I think,
JMRL's IOL procedures.
Yeah, but-
well.
but then do
it
they
doesn't
know what that
exactly- It's
means?
not as descriptive.
But, you know, so this is the policy.
Yeah.
You know, in our circulation policy, I don't know, I have to go look, but it probably doesn't go into quite that much detail.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
But patrons can patrons see our procedure?
No, but we can show it to them.
Right.
and do the procedures say you gotta pick it up?
Correct. You know, the fact that this is so detailed leads me to believe there probably aren't procedures. That this is what we have used as procedures for 10 years.
I think I would suggest repeatedly fail to, I do like the fail because it's more of a, now we're telling you what you need, we expect you to do, rather than accusing you of not doing it. But I would say repeatedly fail to pick up or return loans in good condition.
Yeah,
I mean, Mike, you love a bullet list.
That's just two things. There's only two things. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
felt like you needed more, 3 or more, then sure.
yeah. Feel free
But
to-
then we're back into the, I think we've improved the tone a little bit, but we're back into the kind of a lengthy.
We fail to follow procedures, comma, including, well, I guess you say, the returning
It
items on
really
time
is
and in
just
good
two things, just
condition.
returning items in good condition on time.
Yeah.
And picking up. the item.
Yes.
So I think you could put two things.
And
That's my inclination, but you all.
The person who doesn't do that is gonna read this policy.
Generally, the wrappers that are on the books that the person
yeah,
has
they.
in their
they
hand have
have
a
all
lot of,
that on there.
yeah. Very stern
Mhm.
wording.
Yeah.
Alright, so now this sentence is a monster again. Because JMRL relies on good relationships with its lending libraries, patrons who repeatedly fail to follow JMRL's ILL procedures, including returning items in good condition on time and not picking up requested items,
There needs to be a second sentence.
may result in loss.
I think you want to say picking up requested items to keep it consistent.
Or not. Why get
Right,
rid of
not.
it?
I think you could,
No, you're failing to do this, so she's saying, even both not, I think.
I think you could put all that stuff in parentheses in a second sentence and just end the sentence with may result in a loss of. And then you could say,
Examples include something
Yeah.
like that.
yeah,
I get to put not.
Yeah.
JMRL has relationships with its
May lose, because we're saying
Yeah.
patron.
may lose.
Mhm.
Tony or Kathy, do you think that sounds better at all? Rather than this last paragraph?
Yeah, I was thinking instead of saying may lose, may result in the loss of borrowing privileges.
If you did that, you could do repeated failure to follow.
Yeah, you'd have to take out the patron too.
As JMRL relies on good relationships with its lending partners, repeated failure to follow JMRL's ILL procedures may result in the loss of ILL borrowing privileges. Examples include not returning items in good condition and on time, and not picking up requested items.
That might make it a little less clear because it almost sounds like JMRL
Yeah.
might not be returning items on time. And that's why JMRL might lose privileges. Yeah.
We haven't said what interlibrary loan.
Or you could say a patron's repeated failure. That would be another option.
Yeah.
I'm just saying ILL here, but have we defined that?
You can put in there. Everybody knows what an
Well,
ILL.
that's the trick, right? It's always using our own lingo and people being like, what are they talking about? I mean, effectively, I think this policy was fine as is, if a bit more detailed than we want it to be, but. Job done.
So what we've really done is taken out the, or, move the $3 to a procedural or a separate document and just tweak up the tone of this consequences section. And going back to the fundamental question, I think I do feel that and it sounds like you think staff get benefit out of public being having a clear description of what they can expect.
I think in an ideal world, most of that would be procedural though. This would just say,
Right.
The library offers interlibrary loan services, the library may charge a fee for these services.
Yeah.
Look here for more information.
I'd be open for that. I mean, I do hear you say staff like to be able to point to not just this policy, but other policies, conduct in the library.
Yeah, conduct especially.
And so is it just best to be parallel? Again, ultimately, I want for the public to be able to go to one, what do I need to know to use a library? Be able to go there and kind of like the employee handbook, patron handbook, maybe.
So if you were a patron looking at our website, trying to figure out if we offer interlibrary loan, where is that information covered if not there? It's not under circulation policy.
You actually can't even get to the request form until you go
It's
into
on
the catalog.
The catalog itself, kind of where it is on the classic catalog. Then there's an interlibrary loan. This has even more detail.
Which is okay with me.
But it doesn't have all the detail.
Although it does, well, I say that and then you say it's on the website and where do you point back to? But maybe the website is the.
But all this information is not on the physical form that people also sometimes use, right? That just
I haven't seen
has,
that in a long time. I don't know what that looks like.
it looks sort of like the request for purchase thing, but.
Yeah,
It's pretty broad. It's just what's
Yeah.
the name of the title you're looking
Yeah.
for.
Mhm.
Right. Do you still get a lot of those? Like your submissions are
Here and there. It's mostly, oh, Donna, can you get me this book? And then she
She
magically
fills it
makes it
out.
happen. That's usually how it
Well,
goes.
I think she fills out this. form.
Yes, she probably does, yeah.
Jenny, what do you think? Do you get them mostly in paper or mostly online?
well, we still do plenty of paper forms at Green. But we get forms filled out. too.
It's mostly if we're busy and can't just type the stuff in while they're standing there into the form directly ourselves. And then you have something to hand to them.
I think I'd like this ideally, this interlibrary loan page to more reflect or to have all the information. So that includes like some of the stuff that's in here. But is it worth, so Mike, it's mostly a philosophical question.
Right.
It's, do we want the policy manual to be this thing? It's kind of a mismatch right now and we're trying to clean it up as we see it. Well, here's an opportunity where we could clean it up.
Yeah.
But do we have the time and energy to do that? Is that the important task here?
Well, if we did that, I would want there to be a high quality alternative that's this sort of well organized and consistent repository of patron information.
Because I think for a lot of our policies, when we decide, oh, they're too in the weeds, the answer is that they go into the staff procedural end, and that's not really publicly
Correct.
available. It's not, I mean, I'm happy to give it to anybody, but it's not easy to find. It's
Right.
not out there for the public.
Correct. Yeah.
So I would say we tweak it as is
Yeah, for now.
for now,
Yeah.
and then keep a pin on this one as being one that down the road.
Yeah, I do.
Shorter.
Just becomes a service that we list on the website rather than a policy. that
It
we-
could, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some level, the board has decided, yes, we want to do this, or they could decide, no, we don't want to do this, and that's all we really need the policy to say, yes, we're gonna do this, and then some basic, like, yes, it's okay to charge.
Yeah, I think that's the following 3 years is potentially after we make what we have, the policy manual more user friendly.
The other,
See
public facing.
see what it's about it making a public patron manual type of thing and getting that in it. Because you can tweak the tone on that. Yeah, okay. But
And I
not
think
for,
that's probably tied in pretty closely to a website, to a new website.
Yeah,
How do we present that information there?
yeah, it's just all organization. I think effective organization and presentation, I think, is a valuable goal to always keep in the back of our mind. That's what we're kind of talking about right now. But then, yes, there's the problem with it is it kind of requires a all at once approach. So for today, sure, I think.
So really, the only thing keeping us from doing a reading of this is whether or not the tail end of the first paragraph is still up to date.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But there's no rush on it. We we could read this, the board could read this in January. So we can kind of do the homework offline and then potentially read this in January.
Yeah, so let's ask it this way. Assuming that after research, there's no reason to change the 1989, those last two sentences, then are we ready to recommend this to the board? That would give us the opportunity to do that in January as a reading with that, without us having to meet. Are we comfortable with that?
Yes.
Tony, Kathy, I'm seeing nods around the room, but they're off the screen. So.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so let's, there's no last comments here. Let's get started with website.
Should we share some homework?
Yeah, let's share. So let's just, I think we might all agree that this is super detailed and can be, unlike ILL, it's not something that the public really needs to know about. So I think there's an opportunity to put a lot of this as procedural. I do think there's a place for a website policy for again, at the governance level, we're giving guidance to staff about what the purpose of a website are and maybe some boundaries and guidelines and so forth. So yes, David suggested and I suggested an opportunity for people to do homework and take a step back and sort of a more greenfield approach, look for good models if we can find any, and then maybe start by distilling a set of, a couple of bullet points that we think the website policy needs to fulfill or accomplish, and then we can use that to fill in some.
And before we start that, I'll mention that I think as viewers today, or at least when we started here, Kayla Payne and Sarah Elizabeth were chiming in because they knew that they're listening, because they knew that this was the first time we were going to talk about this.
Okay.
And I told both of them that there would be ample opportunity moving forward to weigh in on it. But if we were to spin off a working group or want to work on this for a couple sessions in this group, we could invite them as well.
Okay, and if they have feedback today, I'm happy to hear it. I don't know if they're.
Raise your hand.
Yeah, especially if they have specific functional goals that they would, from a governance level, they would like to see the website accomplish.
Take one. Would you like to bring them into the meeting?
Okay, go ahead, Sarah Elizabeth. Yes.
Oh,
Hey, Sarah, your mic is off, but you're allowed to talk.
You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Yes. I completely agree. Kayla and I talked about this a bit this morning, that a lot of this is procedure and would be useful for staff to have. As far as the public, and David, we touched on this on some of our advertising and stuff that we include in the website policy about, what content we do host and maybe the steps we do to validate or to approve what links we put up and stuff could maybe help with the solicitations that we get. Not that spammers really want to read our policies first, but we could have it to point to say, this is our policy. So, I mean, that's the initial thought. A lot of this language really needs to be updated to address the new roles of digital services coordinator and the PR role that Jennifer fills. But that's procedure kind of stuff, like you mentioned. So I just would like to be involved in making sure the language is accurate. That's it.
Great. Yeah, that is one of the things I've sort of identified in my mind, which is just like we have a materials selection policy, just some high level guidance on a content selection policy of what's appropriate to include and not. But you can go around the room or raise hands or volunteer to share homework. Jenny's got a paper in her hand to see.
I have a lot of papers here, but I didn't really find out anything that wasn't pretty confusing to me. I mean, it seems like the privacy policies and the website policies are kind of inflated. The stuff that I couldn't really find any single website policies during the time that I spent on this.
I think it's, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna share my homework and back that up a little bit
Okay.
of what I found. But I reached out to the Virginia Public Library Directors Association to see if anybody in the state had any website policies. And I got a lot of internet use policies, which is like using our computers.
Right.
And actually, Barry Trott at the State Library reached out to share Williamsburg's, and it was the internet use. And I said, well, Barry, how about, he's the new adult services consultant. I said, well, how about, a website policy? And his response was kind of similar to Jenny's. He said, well, I think that will be part of your collection management. I think you would address it there, which I could, we could talk about, but I'm not sure it exactly fits there. And then he did offer a few that he found looking around the country. One from Indianapolis Public Library. They call it their web content policy. So this is very much in line with what Sarah was saying. Like it's very specific about like what content they will have. And in that, they had links from third-party websites, links to third-party websites, selection and review, which is more the kind of collection development. And then that was it. Contact the web advisor. So I'll put this in the chat here. He also linked to, I forget who this is. It was under their weeding of materials, weeding of website content policy.
Yeah.
So they want things, it's very similar to CREW, like misleading, superseded, outdated, irrelevant, or you can find it elsewhere. And then that was Lansing, Michigan. And the last one, the same. This was Suttons Bay, Bingham. Their website policy was really about making collection decisions about what's on there.
But they do have a sentence justifying, and I'm interested in something like this. I'm looking at the second sentence. Why would we choose to put link to some outgoing site? And I think there should be some principle that would guide why we would or would not do that.
So it's similar to what, I'm just taking your notes here.
Yeah.
Policy to address how JMRL decides what links to add, what guides those decisions. So that's my homework. Camille, am I good?
I tried to go through our peer libraries list and found very little that was publicly available. Norfolk has something, their online collection development policy, which does the same thing where it approaches it as a piece of the collection. A lot of them at the very bottom of the website would have like a copyright and disclaimer. And in the disclaimer part would talk about, like we're not responsible for whatever's on the sites we're linking to and that kind of thing. But it didn't look like it was a policy.
Did that also include their digital collections? Was that something?
The Norfolk one?
Yeah.
Let me open it again.
Because the wording that you used made it sound like that would go for all their electronic offerings, basically.
So, it starts off with, because there are millions of sites currently on the internet, blah, 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 blah. So they have sort of like a subject guide that links to things on the open internet. And I think that's mostly what this is about, but that's obviously part of their website.
Disclaimer is also one thing I identified as, just can be one sentence, but I found Louisiana State Library.
Hey, it's my alma mater.
Yeah. Well, it's the state of Louisiana, I think, but Louisiana State Library web content disclaimer. I would try. I didn't write down the URL. Yeah, right there. And it's not a great. Every part of it is not wonderful, but if you go to the very end, something like that.
Oh, so this, when you say disclaimer, you mean that we're not responsible for the content of some outside.
Yeah,
site.
yeah.
I think that would probably be useful because those things can change under you.
Right, and I think that's what I understood Camille was speaking to.
Yeah.
Do we have anything, like, if you look at the Library of Congress, if you type in website policies, you get this website user and online collections privacy policy. And there's all these things that say what kinds of information we collect when you use our website and our
Right.
catalog.
Do we use cookies type thing?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, that is a commercial.
We have something, where is that? On the very bottom of our website that says website privacy that talks about cookies.
On the bottom of our policy?
No, on the bottom of our actual website. Tell us what information we can see about you when you're visiting our site and explains what cookies are.
yeah, and different
right.
cookies and web beacons.
No, it's saying website privacy, she's saying website privacy
I know what that
above
is.
that. Yeah.
Well, here is also that disclaimer.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
This is likely something that Sarah, if she hasn't already, we're going to look at and make sure that this is up to date.
Then there's some children's privacy stuff in here because we link to stuff that maybe has to collect some information from you if your child is using it.
And I have a couple things. Were you through with your list?
Yeah.
How about Kathy or Tony?
I don't,
What do you say?
Tony, was that saying you don't have any examples or any thing to add from homework?
no, of course, I did this until my attention span lapsed last week, and it's the same thing. I found a lot of internet access policies, but very few website policies. But I certainly agree about the non-commercial piece.
So for me, just looking at what we had and then just trying to look at a few other things, I did come up with Indianapolis also. I do think it's important to have a mission or a purpose of the website. That would be kind of the first thing, is to explain to staff and users, hey, what's the point of having a website?
I would vote that we don't call it mission statement.
Yeah,
because I
no,
think
In fact, it would say something like, the JMRL's web presence serves its mission by,
tying it into our mission.
yeah, by, focusing on or highlighting our services and so forth. I mean, it does have, I don't think it's sticking it under material selection works because it has a lot of promotional purpose. But I would like to clarify somewhere in there that what we're promoting, the primary purpose is to promote the library's, services. And so I would want something, and this is probably under the first bullet. If there was a food drive in the community and we all thought it was awesome and really important, I still would advocate there would be a principle somewhere that wouldn't be something we would link to. We're not a community hub. That's not our purpose. That's up for discussion when we get there, but that would be the type of boundary that I would want to put in here.
I think we could use some definition and some guidance. That this came up this morning.
Yeah.
It's something that we saw regionally that we're helping. Somebody asked us to put up some flyers about something. It's great. We're happy to put them on our community boards.
Right.
And the question came up is whether or not it should go on JMRL's website.
Correct.
Something important happening in the community.
Right. So, and for me to say that might just be where my opinion personally, individually might lean right now, but I think we're agreeing, David, that some guidance in terms of the scope of this policy, discussing whether or not that's an appropriate use of the website would be the right, something important to cover or useful to cover.
Do you,
Go ahead.
okay, the last bullet, purpose of the site tying into JMR's mission, primary purpose. Somehow we need to take some of that out. We've already identified JMRL, excuse me. We've got library and services. So could we then say primary purpose is to promote its services and take the library out?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're not quite at the wordsmithing yet, Kathy. We're just throwing ideas on there, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I think the selection plan part of what we already have is a
Might
good
be a
place
good
to
start.
start with. How do we decide what's appropriate to put on the site?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. All right, we need to wrap this meeting. Let me throw two other, I think we should have a reconsideration. Well, boilerplate. If you, as a community member, are concerned with something you see on the website, here's what you do. We have you point back to regular reconsideration. I also, we should probably think about or talk about accessibility and whether that's just web accessibility and whether we need to sort of have some guidelines for that at a policy, at a policy level.
So would we like to try to have, like, to make the February is the next policy committee meeting? Do you want to try and have just a work session on this, or do you want to?
Well, one option is a couple of us start writing, a draft to look at,
See where we are.
and see where we are, or we could do it. I find that works better with a few people.
Yeah.
And then of course the whole group can change it all around, but it's better if you have a starting point.
You're right, we do have the full board meeting starting now, so
Yeah.
can we just leave it that in January, we'll touch base, potentially get some folks together to
Yeah.
start brainstorming this offline?
Yeah, if someone between now and then, if someone wants to, is super interested in doing some wording, let me or David know, and we'll probably take it into a smaller, one or two people.
Okay.
Do some work on it. Okay, but yes, we'll continue with website one way or the other. In the next meeting, which will be February.
Thank you all.
Okay, and so I'll close this.